At my mother-in-law's 70th birthday at the French Laundry, my husband laughed at the missing chair. Oops, guess we miscounted. I set down my clutch. Then I'm not family after all, and walked out. 30 minutes later, a black folder appeared at their table. The first thing you notice at the French Laundry is the quiet, not the expensive kind of quiet, the kind they sell you in spa brochures, something older. The kind of quiet that only settles into a room when every surface has been polished so many times that even sound knows not to smudge it. Candlelight catches on crystal. White linen catches the eye like fresh snow. The whole place operates at a frequency of controlled perfection, and I had chosen it specifically because Eleanor once told me, over a Thanksgiving table I had cooked every dish for, that it was the only restaurant worth the drive from the city. I had been planning this dinner for 4 months. 4 months of phone calls with their private events coordinator, a meticulous woman named Celeste, who spoke like she was transcribing everything she said. 4 months of menu negotiations, table configurations, wine pairings, floral arrangements. Eleanor had strong opinions about peonies, too funereal, so we'd gone with white ranunculus and eucalyptus instead. Sean's brother Drew wanted a specific Napa Cabernet that the restaurant didn't regularly carry, and I had tracked down 3 bottles and pre-arranged their delivery. Eleanor's sister Patricia was lactose intolerant. The kitchen had been notified twice. I had booked the private courtyard room, 13 seats. 13, because that was exactly how many people would be attending Eleanor Hargrove's 70th birthday dinner. 10 family members, 1 family friend, Sean, and me. I remember sitting in our kitchen the week before, cross-referencing the seating chart against the RSVPs, counting names, counting seats, 13 and 13, a clean, even match. I had sent the final confirmation to Celeste on a Tuesday morning, so when I walked into that courtyard room in a midnight blue gown, with my hair actually cooperating for once, and my heels not catching on the cobblestones for once, and an entire afternoon of deep breathing behind me, and I saw 12 chairs arranged around a beautifully set table, it didn't compute at first. I stood there and genuinely could not make the math work. 12 chairs, 13 people. All 12 chairs already occupied by people who were laughing and reaching for bread and not quite meeting my eyes. And at the head of the table, in a column of silver silk that probably cost more than my first car, Eleanor Hargrove lifted her champagne glass and smiled at me with all the warmth of polished marble. Oops, said my husband, appearing at my elbow like he'd been waiting just off stage. He surveyed the table with the theatrical helplessness of a man who has rehearsed his helplessness. Guess we miscounted. Someone, I still don't know who, made a small sound, half a laugh, swallowed. I stood very still. The candles flickered. Somewhere in the main dining room beyond the glass, silverware clinked. The air smelled like butter and wood smoke and the good wine that I had arranged, and that was currently being poured into glasses that were not mine. Sean spread his hand toward the table, palm up, like he was displaying a painting. He had on the charcoal bow tie I had picked out for him specifically for tonight. I remember thinking, absurdly, that it was a very good bow tie. Honestly, Karen, his voice was easy, almost gentle, the way you speak to someone you've already decided isn't worth raising your voice for. Maybe this place is a little too refined for you. The room held its breath. You're more mess hall than Michelin. That one landed the way he meant it to. I heard it. I felt it. I absorbed it the way a wall absorbs a bullet. The surface holds, but something behind it cracks. One of the cousins laughed. A real laugh, not an uncomfortable one. Drew's wife put her hand over her mouth, but her eyes were bright. Eleanor took a sip of champagne and looked off toward the garden with the serene expression of a woman at a theater, pleased with the show. And in that 10 seconds, that's all it took. I understood the entire shape of what was happening. This wasn't an accident. There is no world in which 4 months of meticulous planning, a confirmed seating chart, and a private events team produce a 13-person dinner with 12 chairs by mistake. Celeste didn't miscount. The French Laundry doesn't miscount. Someone called. Someone modified the reservation. Someone removed my name from the place cards and said nothing, and then sat in that courtyard and waited to see my face when I arrived. I stood there and understood it completely. 5 years. 5 years of driving Eleanor to her cardiologist appointments when Sean had work calls he couldn't miss. 5 years of managing the family group chat that nobody else wanted to manage, of keeping track of nieces' birthdays and brothers' allergies, and the running never-ending catalog of family drama that someone always needed smoothing over. I had handled Eleanor's kitchen flood. She'd called me, not Sean, and I had coordinated the contractor, the insurance adjuster, and the temporary housing for her cat. I had handled Drew's DUI at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, made the calls, found the attorney, sat with Eleanor while she cried. I had shown up. Over and over and over, I had shown up, and I had made myself useful, and I had made myself small enough to fit into whatever shape the Hargrove family needed me to be, and they had never once, not once, considered me one of them. I could see it so clearly now, that particular flavor of contempt that comes from the people who use you. You become furniture to them. Furniture doesn't get a chair. I set my clutch on the edge of the white linen table, slowly, deliberately. The way you set something down when you want the setting down to mean something. I looked at every single face around that table. Sean with his bow tie, Eleanor with her champagne, Drew with his borrowed Cabernet, Patricia, who was lactose intolerant, who I had protected from discomfort twice this week alone, the cousin who laughed, the cousin's wife with the bright eyes, Vanessa. I noticed Vanessa, seated right next to Sean, in the chair that by all logic should have been the seat most contested at this table, given the geography. His hand was on the back of her chair, not touching her, but close. The way you hold your hand near something warm. Vanessa Reese Hargrove, Drew's wife, my sister-in-law, technically. Beautiful in a quiet, expensive way, like good real estate. She was looking at her bread plate with total concentration. I filed that image away. I looked back at the table. Every face. Every person I had served in one way or another, who was now sitting in silent conspiracy around a table I had booked, at a restaurant I had chosen, at a dinner I had funded, at an event I had spent 4 months building so that this family could celebrate in the manner they felt they deserved. I said very calmly, "Then it seems I'm not family after all." Not a question, not a plea, just a simple statement of fact delivered in the same even tone I used to coordinate contractors and call attorneys and manage other people's crises. Eleanor's smile, just for a second, faltered. I picked up my clutch. I turned around. I walked out of that courtyard with my back straight and my heels not catching on a single cobblestone. Behind me, a chair scraped. A whisper. Was that too much? Sean's voice, low and annoyed, the voice he used when I embarrassed him by having feelings in public. The main dining room was warm and golden and full of strangers having lovely evenings. A server smiled at me. I smiled back. I pushed through the front door and the Napa Valley air hit me. Cold, clean, carrying eucalyptus and distant wood smoke. And I stood in the parking lot under a sky full of stars and let the feeling come. Not tears. Not the hot, embarrassed mess of a woman who has just been publicly humiliated by the people she loved. Something older and sharper than that. Something that had been building for 5 years in the spaces between all the times I told myself I was imagining things, I was being too sensitive. They just had a different way of showing love. Anger, yes. But underneath the anger, clarity. Because here is what Sean forgot. He forgot that I'm not just good at logistics. I'm good at finding things. And 3 days ago, 3 days before this dinner, while I was running the final confirmations and tracking the wine delivery, I found something I wasn't looking for. Let me back up. My name is Karen Whitfield Hargrove. I'm 38 years old. I have a master's degree in organizational management from Georgetown, which I have spent the last 5 years not using because Sean's career required relocating twice, and I had accommodated that. And because the Hargrove family's operational needs, which were considerable, had somehow become a second job that nobody acknowledged as a job. Before I married Sean, I worked in corporate crisis management. I was good at it. I was very good at it, actually. I could walk into a collapsing situation with nothing but a legal pad and a phone, and I would have the pieces sorted before the building finished falling. I met Sean Hargrove at a charity gala for a children's literacy nonprofit I was coordinating. He was charming, he was funny, he had Eleanor's same easy confidence and his father's dark eyes, and he told me on our third date that he had never met anyone as capable as me in his entire life. I took that as a compliment. For a long time, I took it as a compliment. I should have recognized it for what it was. He wasn't falling in love with me. He was hiring me. The marriage was good for 2 years, maybe 3. Then it became comfortable, which is different. Then it became routine. Then it became a business arrangement that only one of us was fully aware was a business arrangement. I organized, I managed, I accommodated, I smoothed. Sean worked, traveled, came home tired, accepted the household I had running and the family I kept in order and the problems I handled before they could reach him. I told myself this was partnership. This was how marriages worked. This was what it looked like to be a team. 3 days ago, on a Monday afternoon, I was sitting at Sean's desk. My desk is in the second bedroom, but his home office has the better printer, printing final confirmations for the dinner. His laptop was open to his email because he'd been using it and stepped away. I wasn't looking. I was waiting for the printer. The email was right there on the screen. Subject line, Thursday. Sender, V, body. I can't wait to see you. Try not to look at me too long or they'll figure it out before she does. I read it 3 times. The printer had my dinner confirmations. I collected them. I set them in a neat stack. I closed the documents. I went upstairs to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and I felt something very calm and very cold settle into the center of my chest, like ice water finding its level. She had said before she does. Present tense, ongoing. I went back to the desk. I opened his email and I searched methodically the way I had been trained to search, by sender initial, by date range, by attachment. What I found had been going on for 14 months. 14 months. A year and 2 months. The second week of last October, which was, I cross-referenced, the Columbus Day weekend, Sean had attended a work conference in San Francisco that I hadn't been invited to because it was client-facing and not really a +1 situation. I had sent him a care package. I found the hotel receipt in an email folder he'd labeled with a single period, a period as a folder name, the kind of thing that doesn't show up in casual browsing. 2 nights at the Hotel Emblem in San Francisco. The room charged to a credit card I had never seen a statement for. Visa ending in 4471. I wrote down the number. The messages were thorough. I didn't read them all. I read enough. The name Vanessa appeared over and over, and each time I read it, I thought about the Hargrove Christmas party and Easter, and Drew's birthday last spring where Vanessa had hugged me and said my dress was beautiful and meant it. I was sure she had meant it. I thought about Eleanor, who had Vanessa to dinner twice a month and had specifically requested she be seated at the head table tonight. I thought about the seating chart. Vanessa right next to Sean. I thought about that word, miscounted. I sat at that desk for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Michael Reyes. Michael Reyes, JD, has been practicing family law in the Bay Area for 22 years. He has a particular specialty in high-asset divorce proceedings and is, and I say this with complete professionalism, the most unflappable human being I have ever met. I had referred 3 separate people to Michael over the years, 2 of them Sean's relatives, because I was the person people called when they needed a good attorney and didn't know where to start. Michael had sent me handwritten thank you notes each time. He picks up on the second ring. "Michael," I said, "I need to retain you, not for a friend this time." A pause, then, "Tell me what you have." I told him what I had. I spent the next 2 days working in parallel. Outwardly, I finalized the dinner, confirmed the wine, confirmed the table, confirmed the flowers. Inwardly, with the focused intensity of someone who has found a second gear they forgot they owned, I documented everything. I photographed Sean's email folder on my own device. I requested, through Michael's office, a preliminary asset investigation. Our finances were more entangled than most people knew. Sean had added me to several accounts over the years in ways that now struck me as having been very deliberately strategic. Michael connected me with Diane Cho, a forensic accountant out of Oakland, who described herself on her voicemail as a forensic accountant and professional finder of things you weren't meant to find. She had been at it for 11 years. Within 48 hours, she had located the visa ending in 4471. It was tied to a business account Sean had opened in the name of a consulting LLC that I had never heard of, registered in Nevada, apparently functional since 2019. "This predates your marriage," Diane told me on the phone, her voice entirely neutral. "He set this up 9 months before your wedding." I wrote that down too. The third person I called was Dr. Lena Park, a licensed therapist I'd been seeing sporadically for 2 years, for what I had vaguely categorized as stress. Dr. Park, whose gentle, careful observations I had been politely minimizing for 24 months, listened to me describe the email folder and the LLC and the missing chair with the expression, I could hear it, of a woman who has been waiting for someone to finally see what she's been seeing all along. "I'm not in crisis," I told her. "I want to be clear about that. I just needed to tell someone who couldn't be subpoenaed." Dr. Park said, "I'm glad you called, and Karen, you're allowed to be in crisis. You know that, right?" I told her I'd circle back to that. Michael compiled everything into what he called, without flourish, the folder. Hotel receipts printed with timestamps, screenshots of messages authenticated by the retrieval method, Exhibit A through Exhibit F, the LLC documentation, a preliminary summary from Diane, 3 pages, itemizing discrepancies in our joint financial records that suggested Sean had been quietly redirecting assets for, at minimum, 2 years. A cover letter from Michael's office, formal and precise, notifying Sean Hargrove of my intent to pursue dissolution of our marriage on grounds that Michael had made very clear would survive any scrutiny. The folder was black, standard legal binder. It looked completely unremarkable. Michael and I met at a coffee shop in St. Helena on the afternoon of the dinner. He wore a dark suit and drank black coffee and reviewed the contents one final time with the focused equanimity of a man who has handed many black folders to many people and has learned not to enjoy it too much. "You're sure about the timing?" he asked. "I need them all in the room," I said. "I need Vanessa in the room." He looked at me for a moment. "That's a choice." "I know." He nodded. That was the end of the discussion. We agreed. 30 minutes from my call. Enough time for them to be settled, for the wine to be open, for the celebration to be in full swing. Long enough for me to be gone before he arrived, so that my absence would be noted and processed, and then the folder would arrive. I have to be honest with you. The missing chair shook me more than I expected. I had known it was coming. I had deduced it, somewhere in the cold, logical architecture of those 48 hours of planning. But I hadn't known it completely until I was standing there. I hadn't known that it would be Sean who said it, that he would look at me in the restaurant I had chosen, under the flowers I had selected, at the table I had booked with my own money, and tell me I was more mess hall than Michelin. I hadn't known how much I had still been hoping I was wrong. I wasn't crying in that parking lot. I want to be clear about that. But I was shaking, very slightly, and I sat in my car for a long moment with my hands in my lap, and I let myself feel it fully. The 5 years of it, the shape of what I had been to these people, the careful architecture of smallness they had built around me until I had almost believed it was my natural size. Almost. I scrolled to Michael's number. I hit call. He answered on the second ring. "Bring the black folder to their table," I said. 30 minutes. Understood. I started the clock. I want to tell you what I know happened in that room, because I have since been told, by Drew actually, of all people, who called me 6 weeks later and spoke in a very different register than I had ever heard from him, in significant detail. The third course had just arrived. Eleanor was mid-toast. Something about family, about legacy, about the Hargrove name. Everyone had their glasses up. There was apparently a general air of festivity with an undertone of mild awkwardness, because the missing chair moment had been stranger than anyone quite admitted, and someone, it was Patricia, it was always going to be Patricia, had already whispered to her husband that maybe they had gone too far. The door to the private courtyard opened. A man in a dark suit walked through. Not a restaurant employee. His bearing was wrong, too deliberate, too purposeful. He carried a black folder. He walked directly to Sean's seat, set the folder on the white linen in front of him, said Mr. Hargrove, and walked out without another word. Drew told me the table went completely silent. Sean picked up the folder. His hands were steady. He is very good at presenting steadiness. It's one of his best qualities. It's what made him so effective at managing my perceptions for 5 years. He opened it. The first page was Michael's cover letter, which opened with the sentence, "Please be advised that Karen Whitfield Hargrove has retained this office in connection with the dissolution of her marriage to Sean Marcus Hargrove. Below that, Exhibit A, a printed screenshot of the email from V, the subject line, the body, the date, the timestamp. Sean's hands did not remain steady. Drew said he watched his brother's face do something that took about 4 seconds and covered a lot of ground. Exhibit B, hotel receipt, hotel emblem, San Francisco, 2 nights, October 14th, 16 of the previous year. Visa ending in 4471, 2 occupants. Exhibit C, a selection of messages printed on clean white paper that began with small things, thinking about you, and became, over 14 months, something considerably less small. Vanessa's full name appeared in those messages. Vanessa Reese Hargrove, spelled out clearly, time-stamped carefully. Vanessa was sitting 3 feet to Sean's left. Drew said she reached for her water glass and knocked it over. He said Eleanor made a sound he had never heard her make before, something small and involuntary, like she'd touched something hot. He said nobody spoke for a very long time. He said the server came in to check on the table and then backed out immediately with the instincts of someone who has encountered human catastrophe in a professional context before. He said Sean closed the folder very carefully, set it on the table, and looked at the space where I was supposed to be sitting. I was in my car on the road back to the city when the 30 minutes elapsed. I wasn't listening to music. I was just driving, watching the headlights catch the vineyard rows on either side of Route 29, those dark geometries scrolling past like columns in a ledger being tallied. The valley was dark and enormous and entirely indifferent to the dinner behind me. My phone buzzed at 9:47 p.m. Sean. I let it ring. It buzzed again at 9:51. Eleanor's number. I let that ring too. Drew called at 10:04 and I let that ring. And by the time I crossed the Bay Bridge, it had rung 4 more times from 4 different numbers, and I had let all of them ring. And I drove through the tunnel with the city lights spread in front of me and felt, for the first time in 5 years, like I was driving somewhere I was actually going. I had been staying with my college roommate, Sarah, for the past 2 days. Another thing I had arranged quietly, in parallel with everything else. My bag was already there. The cats were there. Sarah had a guest room that smelled like cedar and had blackout curtains, and I had, the night before, slept for 8 hours straight without once waking up to check my phone. I didn't cry that night either, or the next morning. I cried on a Thursday afternoon, 11 days later, in Dr. Park's office because she said very quietly, "What would you have done with all that energy, do you think, if you'd spent it on yourself instead?" And something in me broke open that I hadn't known was closed. The answer was, so many things. So many things I had set aside or deferred or minimized or called impractical because someone else's needs were always more immediate, more pressing, more deserving. I cried for about 20 minutes. Dr. Park gave me very good tissues. Then I washed my face and drove home and emailed Diane Cho about the LLC. The formal proceedings took 7 months. Michael Reyes, JD, who I now consider one of the finest attorneys I have ever worked with, was characteristically efficient. The asset discovery process, guided by Diane Cho's forensic work, surfaced the full picture. The Nevada LLC, the Visa card, a second savings account with a balance that made my throat close when I read the number, and a pattern of financial transfers that Diane described in her court affidavit as a systematic and ongoing diversion of marital assets. The word systematic appeared in that affidavit 4 times. Each time I read it, I thought about the word Sean used to describe me at dinner parties. She's so organized. Everyone always laughed. I always laughed too. The affair was, legally, largely beside the point in a no-fault state. But it was not beside the point to Drew. Drew called me, as I mentioned, 6 weeks after the dinner. He had separated from Vanessa within the month. His voice on the phone was flat and strange, like something in him had gone very still. He said, "I'm sorry, Karen. I'm sorry we laughed." I said I appreciated that. He said, "Did you know? Before that night?" I said, 3 days before. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You still planned the whole dinner?" "I'd already paid for it," I said. Seemed ashamed to waste the ranunculus. He made a sound that might have been a laugh, might have been something else. I never had another conversation with Eleanor. She sent a card, handwritten on ivory stock, that arrived 6 weeks into the proceedings. It said, "I hope you understand this was never about you." I read it twice. I set it down. I thought about all the ways that sentence was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. Then I forwarded it to Michael, who filed it in a folder labeled simply Correspondence. It has been 14 months since I sat in that parking lot watching the warm glow of the French Laundry's windows and waited for the clock to run down. I have an apartment in San Francisco now, the upper floor of a Victorian in Coal Valley, with bay windows that catch the afternoon light and a desk that is mine, positioned in front of those windows, where I sit every morning with good coffee and work on the consulting practice I am rebuilding from scratch, organizational crisis management. The thing I was trained for before I got hired without knowing it by a family that needed a manager and called it a marriage. My first 3 clients found me through referrals. 2 of them, I will tell you, are personal friends of Eleanor Hargrove's. Word travels in a particular register among particular people, and the word that traveled about me was apparently, "She is exceptional and you should not underestimate her." I take some satisfaction in that. Dr. Park and I meet on Tuesdays now, and the sessions are different. Still work, because the work is never really finished, but a different kind of work. Less excavation, more construction. She asked me once, recently, if I still thought about that parking lot, if it was traumatic, that moment. I thought about it for a while. The parking lot wasn't traumatic, I said. The 5 years before it were. The parking lot was just where I finally stopped. She wrote something down. She does that when I say something she thinks is true. Sarah came up from Los Los Angeles last spring and we had dinner. Just us, a small restaurant in the Mission. Nothing Michelin, very much mess hall. Absolutely perfect. And somewhere in the middle of a second bottle of wine, she said, "Can I ask you something? When you were in that parking lot, when were you scared?" I thought about the cold air, the vineyards dark past the lights, my hands in my lap. "No," I said. "I think that was the first time in years I wasn't." She raised her glass. I raised mine. Outside, the city moved in its enormous, indifferent way, doing what cities do, holding all those lives inside it, all those perfectly set tables, and all those missing chairs, and all the people who are finally, after a long time, finding their way toward a seat that was always theirs.